advocating the proposition we should, for the most part, and for now, respect wild animals' right to breed, kill other animals, and live full lives in wild habitat. And I've got like a more in-depth statement, which kind of that's the like TDLR of this. So we should hold the preference of desiring to grant collective legal rights for non-human animals to have a refuge in dense wildlife habitat in terms of our relationship to them, where they aren't subject to human cruelty. So where they can, for the most part, breed, kill other animals, and potentially live long lives in wild habitat, uninhibited by humans, with the few exceptions where, for example, animals have been domesticated, and so it would be cruel to release them into the wild, and so where ideally we should let them live out their potentially long lives before a natural death / euthanasia, or where the law is overridden by right to self-defense or by special dispensation from the government, for example, to practice some scientific testing to cure diseases, or a compulsory purchase act where suitable provisions are made for the well-being of the animals being relocated, or where it would be good to breed and keep guide dogs for the blind, etc. So yeah, there you go. That's my opening thing. And then I have like virtue ethics and existential ethics arguments for my case, but yeah.
Yeah, so my basic case would be that I don't think that we should allow wild animals to generally breed, given that A, our interference with wild animals is necessary for civilization, for things like fossil fuels, coal, well, I don't think coal is that necessary, but oil and natural gas, certainly, they cause some amount of damage to animals, crop yields, they all cause some amount of damage to animals, which is necessary. But more importantly, I don't think that it's necessarily a bad thing. And the reason is because I think the vast majority of animals live short, miserable lives of immense suffering. Most animals are strategists, which means that they have enormous numbers of descendants, very few of whom will survive. For example, tuna lay about 10 million eggs, mola lay about 800 million eggs, salmon lay about 5,000 eggs. And so given this, for every offspring who survives to reproduce, there will be thousands or millions who die at a very, very short age, such that, as Brian Tomasic has pointed out, on average, the amount of suffering goes down when there is habitat destruction, and the amount of suffering in nature dramatically outweighs the amount of well-being. I think that suffering is a thing that we generally recognize as bad. When we consider what it's like to suffer, we think that that's a bad thing. And so the 6,000 years worth of horrific torture that's experienced, according to a paper by Oscar Horta, each time a type of tuna reproduced. And by the way, when Horta is describing the immense forms of suffering, this is the 10 seconds right before death. So the 6,000 years worth of just the 10 seconds right before death is not a fate. It should be foisted upon sentient beings, unless we have a good reason for it. And we don't have a good reason for it, just on the basis of protecting nature. I'm a utilitarian. I'd be happy to do the utilitarianism virtue ethics debate, given that that seems relevant, but I'm not sure why it's virtuous to preserve the Hobbesian hellhole that is the status quo of nature. So we can move on into open questioning.
Right. Okay. So yeah, the debate. I just remind everyone that the debate prop is we should, for the most part, and for now, respect wild animals' right to breed, and that for now is going to hold a lot of do a lot of the heavy lifting in the debate, because obviously we can like imagine like if we could get placed in infinite pleasure machines, whether that would be good for us, and if in the premise of the question that we are receiving infinite pleasure, then obviously in a vacuum, then that's good. But it's just whether we can have a desire to get into the machine in our current situation in the world. And so like any interventions in wild habitat now are, I think, more likely to cause more suffering than not, until we can fully understand the ecosystem and what
Yeah, so I would just disagree with that claim, because I think generally when we intervene in nature, it's generally a good thing if it reduces the number of wild animals, given that most wild animals live tortured lives that are very short and full of almost exclusively suffering. Also, Based on the debate prop that you sent out, it did not say right now. It said, we should, for the most part, respect wild animals' right to breed, kill other animals, live full lives in wild habitat. That is the quote verbatim. So I think right now our ability to solve suffering is certainly more limited than it would be in the future. But I think that the proposition is making a general statement rather than merely a statement about the present.
Right, I did put in the text, and I did point it out before we started the debate. But yeah, we should for the most part is a reference to understanding our situation in the present, and like for the
most part does not necessarily indicate, like I might say, like human civilization for the most part has been worse than it is today. That obviously would not be a statement about what's happening right now. For the most part, just makes a statement about what happens most of the time. It doesn't have a set temporal horizon.
Mm-hmm. Do you like? I want to like. I'm sorry.
I'm happy. Cool. Yeah, I'm happy to take you up on the debate about right now whether we should intervene. I mean, how do you propose to run civilization without things like oil and natural gas and even renewable energy, which causes the deaths of animals to some degree?
How do I propose to run this? What was the question again?
So, I mean, how do you propose to run civilization without the deaths of wild animals?
No, I understand there will be deaths of wild animals.
And things like natural gas and oil.
I'm well aware that there will be deaths of wild animals. I'm saying we should try to start off with a basis of freedom and protecting negative liberties as much as we can.
You said for the most part. I think for the most part our interventions are good to the extent that they reduce suffering. And I can send you. I mean, there was a paper by Brian Tomasic that attempted to quantify it and concluded they generally reduce suffering. Do you have any empirical? What is the basis for your conclusion that the amount of suffering caused by our actions is generally greater than the amount of well-being?
No, I don't say that that's the correct situation. I think what you're talking about is like a pain pleasure calculus. What we're going to get into is that I measure things based on suffering being necessary for happy flourishing, and if once an animal is born into the world, like I'm happy to talk about. So like we have ecologies of fear where predators move animals around and help create more stable animal populations. So rather than like the boom and bust of like climate of having like lots of like weak animals get to adulthood and then all die off at once because of like a drought or all the grass has turned to mud or something, like predators help create like a more even boom and bust cycle. Where,
but this debate's not about predators in particular. It's just about kind of general nature interference. So, I mean, you mentioned that you have a different non-utilitarian criterion for determining if our interventions in nature are good or bad. So what is the criterion for determining if an intervention in nature is good or bad, if it's not a utilitarian one?
That the animals are living lives that have they're expressing their capabilities to such an extent where they're feeling happy, flourishing, whether or not they are having more pain.
Okay, so but that's not a criterion for evaluating an intervention. That's a fact about animals. So would the question be if animals have more happy, flourishing? Yeah, go ahead.
You let me finish the sentence. Like that's the foundational philosophy which I'm using, and then so to the extent that like disease or something else can affect whether animals are able to express their capabilities, then it's reasonable to intervene. It's reasonable to try and find cures for diseases, but it's not reasonable to just like kill off predators because of like a pain pleasure calculus of suffering like
okay,
predators.
So you're giving a lot of things that it's not. I'm just looking for a simple criterion that we can apply to figure out if an intervention is good. I'm not looking for like a broad axiology of just what things we should care about in nature. Just like, surely some interventions are good, others are bad. So how, if we're looking at an intervention, how do we figure out if it's good or bad? Note, the answer to that is not an example of a thing that's good or an example of a thing that's bad. The answer is a criterion for determining if it's good or bad.
Yeah, the criterion is whether is happy flourishing versus painful stultifying. So rather than like a pain
So
pleasure calculation.
that's not a criterion. That's like, so with a
You give me
criterion,
an,
if it
you give me an
wait,
example of
so
a criterion that you use.
yeah, so an example of a criterion would be like my criterion would be an intervention is good if it increases well-being.
Okay.
Or if it increases the well-being of conscious creatures. So what would your criteria be?
An intervention is good if it increases happy flourishing. An intervention is bad if it increases painful stultifying. A different calculus.
Well, but okay, what if it increases both happy flourishing and painful suffering?
Then it's just neutral.
Wait, okay, like, so if it makes it so that there's one iota of increased happiness, but millions of years of increased suffering, you would say that's neutral.
I'm not saying happy flourishing versus suffering. I'm saying happy flourishing versus painful stultifying. So like if you think about like Miles.
See frozen for anyone else?
Yep, he's frozen for me too. Maybe give him a sec.
Wow. The wild animal has attacked his internet connection.
Yeah, it could be what happened. I'll ping him real quick in debate chat, just let him know he's frozen. Oh, looks like he got booted out. Hopefully we'll rejoin in a couple seconds. I think you just joined Asgrad, just so you know we're not just hanging out in here, not talking. There actually is a debate going on, just technical issues for one of the debaters. Okay, there he is. Welcome back, Ishkah. I'll unmute you. Should be able to talk in video now.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so okay, so yeah, why do you want to leave off? I was saying like different calculus, happy flourishing, painful stultifying. I want to increase the amount of happy flourishing in the world. You're muted again, Omni.
Real quick, did you want to turn your video back on, Ishkah, or no?
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Wait, what's the word that you're saying? Like stultifying?
Painful stultifying. Yeah, it's like that virtue ethics is more concerned about authenticity and about ataraxia, like you finding like an inner peace. So animals can enjoy play and they can enjoy achieving goals, expressing their capabilities, and it's different. And when they're not able to express their capabilities, it's a different kind of suffering. It's like not being able to self-actualize. It's a different kind of suffering to just pain, like a pain pleasure.
Okay, so can animals self-actualize if they're horrifically tortured?
No, that would be an example of them experiencing pain. But
okay, the vast majority of animals die at the age of at a day of age.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so, die in ways that are painful. Is that pain bad?
Your video is frozen for me. I don't know. Is it frozen for everyone? Just it'd be good to talk to your face.
It's just frozen for you, I think. It's not frozen for me.
Oh, okay. Shit. Sorry, I'll disconnect and join back in.
Wow, the wild animal is just getting his connection once more.
Cool, that's good now. Sorry about that. Okay, so yeah, that's why I wanted the debate to be for now, because I just it's interesting sort of experiment to just wipe off wild animals and obviously the face of the earth, but I'm more concerned with the next 100 years of the vegan movement and how we get people on board. We either use the basis of trying to get people to care about their responsibilities and the effects that they have on a day-to-day, or in terms of increasing the autonomy and freedom of animals.
Well, I think horrific torture is horrific torture regardless of who's causing it. So
yeah, no, I understand that, but sorry, thank you. Technical shit. So yeah, definitely, I agree with So my point is that if I believed in your philosophy, the 100-year plan and then the 500-year plan for what I would like to see people do is social, in terms of social movement, in terms of advocacy, and what I'm interested in debating you on is that even if I agreed with you, I think I just wouldn't. In terms of appealing to people, maybe it's just an optics debate, but can I just say another thing? We should appeal to people on caring about their responsibility, caring about the freedom of animals to pursue their own autonomy, and then work out even if we could get robot AIs running around with lab grown meat, or sterilizing all animals, wait to give that argument when we've got a whole vegan world or something
okay, but that's just a question about whether or not the thing that's productive to advocate for. That's not an objection to the position substantively, and additionally, I mean,
that's
if we well, no, the debate is not about which one we should advocate for.
We should, for the most part, for now, respect wild animals' right to breed. That.
Right. It's not about
the reason for doing that.
Yeah, it's not about whether we should, for the most part, advocate instead of veganism for protecting the wild animals.
We should, in effect, respect their rights because it's just the best thing to do all around. It's the most reasonable course of action.
The argument that you gave doesn't argue against that. It just argues against the notion that we should. That we should actively advocate against it.
Sorry, say again. Last part.
You just made an argument for why we should advocate for that, not an argument for why
we should advocate for respecting
not for why your position's true. Much like it might be the case that open borders are a good idea, but we shouldn't advocate for open borders. It might be the case that we should not leave wild animals alone, but that's just not a main focus of advocacy.
Okay, I'm really sorry that I didn't give you the exact text that I wanted to use in the debate beforehand, but the for now bit is really important. We should for now respect the wild animals' rights breed because of all these things. But you're not proving that.
You're not proving that. You're just proving that for now we should advocate for respecting wild animals' rights.
We should absolutely do it, because even if you're saying that we should in your argument we should be buying beef burgers in order to encourage the mowing down of the Amazon.
Beef burgers increase wild animal suffering.
No, the burning down of the Amazon is for
also contribute to global warming, which likely increases wild animal suffering, according to estimates.
Well, not if we keep going the way we're going and we pave over the rainforest in concrete,
Yeah, but that also increases the number of R strategists, which increases suffering by creating a more stable environment, an unstable environment. I meant.
So you don't like unstable environments, even if it sterilizes more animals or kills more animals.
No, well, unstable environments are bad because they increase wild animal suffering. They create more R strategists.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know. So.
Okay, I mean, I think I can give you an argument for why suffering is bad, and if suffering is bad, I think my position straightforwardly follows. Suffering is bad. We have reached that belief. Well, one, that's just kind of common sense. When suffering might not be all that's bad, but generally when we think of, the difference between like, have you seen the movie Princess Bride, for example?
No.
Okay, suppose that you injected a needle into someone that either inflicted them with 1 unit of pain or with 50 units of pain. I think that inflicting them with 50 units of pain would be worse, right? Because we generally think suffering is bad. Second, our belief in suffering's badness is arrived through the process of phenomenal introspection, which involves thinking through our mental states and determining what they're like. So we think about what it's like when we suffer and come to conclusions. That leads us to the belief that suffering is bad, and it's reliable given that organisms who can figure out what their experiences are like are more likely to survive than organisms who cannot figure out what their suffering is like. So our belief in the badness of suffering is likely to be reliable.
I never disagreed that suffering is bad.
Okay, so then why shouldn't we interfere with the horrendous suffering that occurs in nature?
We possibly can in the far future, but
why shouldn't we now? If we can reduce suffering,
what kind of methods would you use to run this?
I think that habitat destruction is often a good thing, and certainly if it advances important human aims. So, for example, I think that using natural gas is quite important for human civilization. Using oil is important for human civilization, which is why increases in the price of oil are associated with international.
But you just said unstable environments cause more R selection or whatever, so more suffering. So
there are effects that go in both directions. In the case of destroying the Amazon, plausibly increases suffering. In the case of much of our other wild animal suffering, it decreases suffering. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of why you wouldn't want to destroy, so so you're not for destroying the Amazon, but you are for destroying what is a good example of an habitat?
I think that
in the short term.
Well, the Amazon is responsible. When we destroy the Amazon, it causes a lot of global warming, which is plausibly a very bad thing. But I mean, if we just destroy just a random habitat in the middle of Southern California, if we do deep sea mining, if we extract coal, that'll have the effect of destroying habitats. Well, I think coal is bad, but oil or natural gas, that'll have the effect of destroying habitats. I think that's plausibly a good thing.
Well, yeah, obviously, we're going to need to extract some gas in the process of moving over to renewable energy. But
that would involve interfering with nature, right?
Yeah, I'm not. I said for the most part, I'm not for again. I'm not. I said for the most part, and we can also relocate animals. So we can in the process of destroying what.
We obviously can't relocate all the animals who are affected by the extraction of oil and natural gas.
I know we can't all. I'm saying that we
can't relocate most of them.
No, we can create.
That would just be practically impossible.
I know that. I said you saying you want to destroy your habitats because of gas for transforming the planet into this techno future landscape. I'm saying when we do find gas in a certain location, we can do extra efforts to restore habitat next to that gas field so that more animals flock to that area, so that some animals relocate.
Yeah, we shouldn't do that though. We shouldn't add more area because that causes enormous amounts of wild animal suffering.
Okay, so let's
We
get
certainly
to
shouldn't replenish nature, given that according to upwards of 5 studies that were cited by Tomasic, suffering outweighs the well-being.
yeah, but I'm not using a suffering well-being calculus. So let's get to. I agree that
we should
suffering on its own.
the suffering well-being calculus, which you didn't address.
No, you said like 50, you said we can experience suffering and 50 amounts of suffering is worse than one suffering, and I agree with that. But
yeah, so suffering is bad. Other things might be bad, but the sheer amount of suffering is just going to outweigh. But a phenomenal introspection argument makes it so that we're like, if it goes through, it justifies utilitarianism. So you have to dispute one of the premises.
can you actually put that in the premise in chat? Do you have it copy pasted?
I don't, but I can type it up.
Okay. Yeah, I agree. Suffering is bad on its own, but where there's the presence of like peace of mind,
that brings well-being.
Sorry.
That brings well-being.
It brings where there's peace of mind and like achievement of goals. It brings more well-being than more well-being in the form of happy flourishing than pain.
But it doesn't. You would be wrong about that as an empirical point.
Well, but you're not even like choosing to take that into your analysis. We're just working from a different philosophical foundation.
No, I'm also looking at well-being and suffering.
Yeah, I know you are, but that's the only thing you're looking at.
What thing am I neglecting?
Happy flourishing. You're not. I don't think.
Yeah, I am. That would be part of well-being.
The achievement of goals and self-actualization.
Yeah, those would bring well-being.
Yeah, but I am looking at I'm looking at well-being and pain, and that is if there's no existence of happy flourishing and no existence of painful suffering, then I defer to pain, pleasure, suffering. So. But you're reducing all of happy flourishing.
Why is flourishing that brings about no well-being a good thing?
Because it's the reason that all animals desire to be alive in terms of following their interests.
Animals desire the avoidance of suffering.
Say again.
Animals desire the avoidance of suffering.
Yeah, if there's no chance of happy flourishing, then they defer to avoiding suffering or just finding short term pleasure.
Animals are reliable and accurate judges of what's good for them.
I can't hear what you're saying. Sorry.
Why do you think animals are accurate judges of what's good for them?
Well, they're not. They're not.
Why should we trust their desires in terms of what's actually good for them?
They're not in terms of if an animal is saying the same way we could say I just enjoy eating ice cream all day that makes sense on a pain pleasure calculus, but we need to use these other levels of self-actualization in order to. Sorry.
Why do we need to use self-actualization?
Because if we just looked at pain pleasure, we would understand that at a certain point the pleasure goes into pain. But in order to understand why that happens, you need to understand that animals are seeking this high level of goal seeking that isn't encapsulated in explaining.
Why is that needed to explain when an experience change from pleasure to pain?
Because otherwise you're not. You're not making. Sorry.
I mean, why? You're just kind of repeating the thing that I asked you to justify.
Because if you're only looking at it as what this is getting so many points of well-being and so many points of you need in order to know why it went from pleasure to pain all of a sudden. You can't just look at it in terms of a mathematical he was experiencing.
That is again question begging. I'm asking you to justify why that's true, and then you're just asserting the claim that I'm asking you to justify. I didn't mean to say asserting so aggressively. That was weird.
Okay, well, you explain to me like what analysis you're using to understand well-being, and I'll explain my analysis for.
We have certain experiences that we think, when we think about them, we conclude that they're good and we desire them when experienced. Others that we desire their avoidance when experienced, and we think they're bad when we experience them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But
that's my account.
Okay. And
why can't that account for?
Well, it just, I mean, you can say that you're doing that and looking at character virtue. It's just that it seems like you're not. It seems you're not willing to like take higher levels of well-being as more preferable than suffering.
We would just include those in well-being.
Say again?
We would just include those as part of well-being.
Yeah, no, that's fine. You're welcome to do that, but like I'm not using utilitarian foundation. I don't think so.
I am, and you haven't addressed my argument for it.
Okay. Well, one reason for humans using a character virtue system is it's just more it's more easily assimilatable into everyday practice. Like we use intuitional duties as part of our character virtue practice. So like
we also use assumptions about well-being as part of it. But that's a claim about epistemology, not ontology.
Say the first part again.
Well, yeah, but that's just a claim about how we apply it, about how we know what things meet the moral system. That's not a justification for the moral system.
Okay, let's start again. From first principles. I'm saying we should increase happy flourishing in the world, and we should decrease painful simplifying in the world. My version of happy flourishing incorporates intuitional duties. You don't want to do that. You want to only look at purely utility. So I'm saying
if something's a duty.
It's different for everyone, but if like we can use moral virtue exemplars as like guide sticks, whether like
I don't want examples. I just want a criterion.
Well, it's subjective. I'm not arguing for moral realism.
I am a moral realist. Are you not?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, but I mean. But you don't have to be a moral realist to think that there's some actual way of.
Okay. Yeah. So
in my attic, which is not good. But anyways, I heard sounds coming from above. But anyways, I mean, but if your criterion literally cannot be applied at all, you don't need to accept moral realism to say that you should actually give a metric for determining if things are good or bad.
No, you don't. But I don't find them useful.
So you have no metric for determining if things are good or bad beyond these just vague like gestures which you can't quantify.
I don't think you need to quantify things by metrics in order for them to have the most utility.
I don't know what you're talking about. If you have no way of determining if something is good or bad based on a metric that you've given, no way of determining if something should be a duty or not, and I don't know like what way. I mean, if it's just an arbitrary assortment of things that you happen to care about.
No, I can give you lots of
different things.
I can give you like there's going to be like a cluster of ethics in which like my interests align with other people's interests. And I can explain how people are using metrics in their everyday life. Like so there's the example of so in terms of intuitional duties, like I can give you an example of how it would be in my interests if someone used the intuitional duties in this way. So I'll give you an example of, say, someone was coming to meet me for a like dinner date that we planned. we both had a duty to each other to come to this dinner date. But if they're on the way to meet me, they saw a car crash and the person.
I'm familiar with the example.
Okay.
But A, that's an example, not a criterion, and B, utilitarianism can give a plausible account why you should do that.
Of course you can.
Right, so do you have an look, I mean, you have not justified a criterion for determining if something's happy flourishing, which means I can just assert that when animals suffer in ways that are foreclosed by, like, when we destroy habitats, I can just assert that those decrease the stultifying suffering or whatever you said.
I can give you criterions for how that person acted and like as well, like my virtue ethics that incorporates intuitional duties. I can explain how that goes. How when something passes a certain threshold, it goes from consequent. It goes from like caring about individual negative liberty consequentialism into intuitional duties of the community, and then when it passes another threshold, it folds back into consequences of the international. So there are like thresholds in which I have a preference that people would like fall into these.
Well, why doesn't the 6,000 years worth of suffering that occurs every time the type of tuna reproduces, why doesn't that go above and beyond the threshold?
The threshold.
We have to go in about 15 minutes.
Okay, that's fine. We've gone everywhere, all around in roundabouts, and haven't really found a way of tackling this issue.
I just don't think that you have an answer to most of the like questions I'm asking. I don't think the system is precise enough to be applicable.
It's not. Yeah, it's not, because I don't think we have enough data. I think we have to stay agnostic in terms of like.
You deny that every time the type of tuna that Oscar Horta in his study analyzed, you deny that each time it reproduced there would be 6,000 years worth of horrific suffering?
On a pain and pleasure calculus.
10 seconds right before death. I can link you the paper.
That's kind of, on a pain and pleasure calculus maybe. But I'm interested, like, so you get, so...
Can you say that pain and pleasure do matter? They just can sometimes be outweighed by other things? Okay, so what is the other criterion? It's outweighing the 6,000 years worth of horrific torture every time there's a reproduction. So just that, like, one tuna survives to be 3 years old, and the other millions will die off. Why is that a thing overall?
Because I would want to know what interventions we did, and, like, so, for example,
when we, like, destroy fishing habitats, when we reduce the number of fish.
So, but in what, like, how do you know that other fish won't come back and like starve or whatever? Like, so, like, you can one example, like I've explained how I'm using different calculus. I want to hear how your calculus interacts with my example now. So, my example is what I explained at the beginning. Like you can either reintroduce predators and create like a more even boom and bust cycle where animals aren't dying of starvation and the weak animals aren't growing to adulthood, or we can introduce predators and they kill off more young animals, so less animals are existing in this life of suffering. And I think that's a good effect that we can have.
Wait, what's the example that you want me to?
Basically, Yellowstone, like we're introducing predators. We're introducing wolves from Canada.
I'm agnostic there.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
It seems intuitively like I would give maybe 55% odds that it's bad, but I don't have a very strong opinion.
Well, let me hear your Can I hear your reason?
Well, I don't know. I remember I saw a video like a few months ago, and it was kind of persuasive. I mean, I'm not prepared to defend this random specific example, but this is
I'm not
really good.
Okay, well, I'm not prepared to defend all your examples. Like, I'm interested in what we're doing next 100 years, and like for now, and I
think that current habitat destruction is a good thing and reduces suffering. And you have a paper by Tomasik that came to that same.
I've already heard you say that. Like, I'm happy for you.
Yeah, and you haven't responded to the argument.
You haven't responded to the argument of like Yellowstone. I'm asking like. I don't know.
I don't need to give my take on Yellowstone. That's one example of an intervention that I'm agnostic about.
Okay, well, I'm agnostic that we have the data on most examples.
I do have the data on that. And also, even if you won the Yellowstone example, that wouldn't advance your position. Right? Could be the case that the Yellowstone intervention was good or bad. It wouldn't prove a general rule about most interventions. But a broad claim about habitat destruction, which is the majority of the interventions, are good.
Okay, so in my case, so for the majority of the biggest example of like habitat destruction is the Amazon, and you've already said that you don't think that's good. So I don't know.
Well, wait, I don't think that's not the biggest example of habitat destruction. There's a lot of habitat destruction that's not in the no, it's not. I mean, there's the fishing in other areas other than the Amazon rainforest.
Okay, but that's the densest wildlife habitat that is getting
it's the densest. There are a lot of other habitat wildlife that plausibly make it so that overall suffering increases. I'm also I don't know, kind of agnostic to whether it's good or bad. Our destruction of the Amazon could be bad, could be good. I don't know.
Okay, well, it sounds like I don't know. It sounds like you have to go soon. I don't know how to progress this conversation. Like you can give more like the reason I said that Amazon was the biggest is because it's like the biggest like ecosystem in which, but like you can give examples of other ecosystems.
The Amazon's the most dense, but that doesn't mean that it's responsible for the majority of worldwide habitat destruction. But should we go into closing statements now?
Sure. Okay.
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So we didn't get into any of the things out. Well, you have to go, don't you? So, like, I wanted to give like my virtue ethics argument for why I'm vegan and why I think we have to stay agnostic on wildlife habitat destruction. If the wonder that we experience in viewing wild animals is not how similar to us they are, but they're real opportunities to do and be what they have reasons value. And one sufficient reason we grant this freedom, at least to a basic extent to humans, is they have a desire to achieve what they find valuable. Then the fact non-human animals experience this desire to means we ought to extend these freedoms to animals. So a holistic worldview of not wanting to reduce both the quality and quantity of positive experiences humans can have with animals, as well as animals with other animals. And I don't know. I was willing to bite the bullet on. I thought maybe this was going to go into like name the trait. I was willing to bite the bullet on like aliens coming down and killing amoral aliens coming down and killing amoral humans if they're like 150 years removed from us. And I think like we should. And I think wait a second. I think not having, and I think like we can still stay focused on if aliens are capable of understanding ethics, coming down and having interest to kill sentient life, where they could just eat plants, we can still call that unjustifiable, and that's the place, and that situation relates to almost everyone on Earth. So that's the situation in which we need to be arguing, keeping things simple, and it helps the legal animal rights movement stay focused on preventing the harm that we are responsible for. It helps people understand the really clear timeline of how we destroyed wild habitat and domesticated prey animals to live these lives of confinement and desires with no ability to express them, and how now with modern technology and vegan diets we can free up more land to restore wild habitat for the animals, wild animals to express their capabilities and experience happy flourishing. So yeah, that's me.
Okay.
Do you have any questions?
You're done, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to mute yourself? Just so
sure.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think that it's pretty clear that that many of our interventions reduce suffering. Most animals in nature live horrific lives, such that, for example, the tuna, the analyze every time there's a reproduction, there's like 6,000 years worth of extreme torture, given several arguments for why that's a bad thing. None of them were addressed, including the argument from phenomenal introspection, which would entail utilitarianism. And I've also given empirical data that from utilitarianism, the amount of suffering of wild animals outweighs well-being, and that from utilitarianism, it's good when we destroy wild animals habitats. In terms of the argument that was made about like animals' purpose and is to like survive in the virtue ethics point, well, it was agreed that animal suffering is prima facie bad. So just the sheer amount of suffering is going to outweigh, and I don't think that we have a moral obligation to act in accordance with our purpose. Things can act in accordance with our purpose but still be bad. So, for example, if you have a slave ship that's purpose is to collect slaves, even if it's acting in accordance with its purpose, that's still a bad thing. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, util is true. It's not the argument for util. It's unaddressed, and the argument that flourishing and suffering, that there's more suffering when we destroy habitats in nature. So I think that from this we should conclude that it's good to interfere with nature to try to reduce suffering.